Okay, well, government guidance is being sought after in pretty much every direction. Businesses seeking confirmation around the easing of lockdown restrictions. But another type of guidance is also being sought from, as well as the startup community, obviously, but I think just the broader community, and that's around financial advice. The educational standards legislation has now turned into a bit of a political football, leaving many in this space worried about their requirements and what they need to do to be able to serve their clients. Mark Hoven from Advisor Ratings joins us now to bring us up to speed with the latest. Mark, tell us where we're up to with these legislative sort of educational standards.
Good afternoon. Well, last week we thought this was going to pass through the Senate unopposed. It was flagged by Senator Jane Hume as uncontroversial, and we thought it would pass. But at the last moment, the opposition attached some conditions to that bill, which again was to extend the deadline for, just to be clear, extend the deadline for when advisors need to complete the exam. Existing advisors needed to complete the exam by the end of this year, and pushing back the 5-year requirement to meet the minimum education standard by another year. So that has been held back in Parliament. The condition that was attached at the last moment to the bill was in relation to stamping fees on LICs, LITs, and maybe to some extent hybrid securities as well. So a desire to pass the legislation now being connected to a carve-out that was put in place by the Abbott government way back in 2014 to allow advisors and brokers to take a commission or a stamping fee on selling or recommending LITs and LICs.
Oh, right, because I was going to say it didn't sound particularly related, but they are.
They're connected. I think many have questioned why that carve-out occurred way back in 2014. In the same way, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, should they have really carved out grandfathering? So it's understandable that at a time when we are removing all kinds of conflicted payments in the terms of removing grandfathering, for instance, by the end of this year, that there should also be a call to remove that carve-out too.
Mate, can I ask what the potential fallout is for the sector if this gets stuck in the Senate and doesn't go anywhere for the next 3-6 months?
Yeah, I think, Simon, that's the worry. I think a lot of advisors were looking forward to this certainty by this legislation passing. So they're now really confronted with what they've been facing for some time, which is the legislative deadline is still the end of this year. So to put some numbers around that, we have had just over 7,000 advisors sit the exam, and 6,500 have passed. That leaves another 16,000 advisors who still need to sit the exam, potentially in the next 7 months, and potentially with only 3 sittings scheduled by the regulator. So that is a massive logjam of advisors who have to fire up those books and complete the exam. For those who are sitting around, and many I think have anticipated that the government would pass this legislation and they'd have an extra 12 months and possibly another 5 or 6 exam settings in 2021, well, it's hard to know if they can rely on that.
So how late is the sort of the last exam setting? Because a lay person would just say, well, why don't you just start studying and get ready and just do it?
Well, that's right. And I think there are lots of advisors who don't have any sympathy for those who still haven't sat the exam. Clearly, there are 2 schools of thought. In fact, there are many schools of thought around this FASEA legislation for something that's been introduced to an industry that has essentially been running without this obligation from its inception. Many are upset philosophically by having to do it in the first place, but there are many people who've done the work, sat the exam, passed it, and are now fully compliant. And I think they believe the rest of the advisors should get on with it too and stop complaining. It's easy to say that. Of course, there is a lot of work involved. Advisors are flat out anyway right now re-engineering their businesses post all the regulatory reform from Royal Commission. They're clearly dealing with a massive influx in demand and attention demanded by their clients, appropriately so, given the current economic circumstances. So it's really not a great time to be leaving this to the last moment.
So Mark, can I just ask, the difference in terms of, I'm a layperson, I walk into a financial advisor and the certificate's on the wall from the 6,500 who've passed. What's the reassurance I get from that?
Well, it shows somebody who's prepared to look to the future and accept that the industry, the community, the government, regulators expect the advice industry to change its shape, first and foremost to become a professional industry in the same way that we rely on those certificates on the walls for doctors and lawyers and accountants. So that's the new normal that's been put in place. So consumers should expect to see that. It's only a part of determining whether that advisor is going to be good for you. It's just a part, and I think sometimes there's been too much focus on this professionalism and education to effectively define a good advisor. It's just a part of it, and a consumer needs to ask all kinds of other questions about whether this advisor has the skill sets and the specializations to help me with what I need help with, and just as importantly, given that advisors provide so much emotional support, particularly at a time like right now, do they have a good fit with me? Can I develop a rapport with them? Do they truly understand who I am and what I'm about? And will they give me the kind of advice that I'm actually going to trust and execute on?
Yeah, cool. Mark Hoven, as always, great to talk to you. We'll catch up with you again next week.
Thank you. See you then.